All right, guys, welcome back to another wonderful, not exhilarating, but wonderful and exciting episode of Energy Bites. John Calfan here with my trusted partner, Bobby Nealon.
What's going on?
How you doing, man?
Doing great.
Doing good. We got Ted Cross today. How are you doing?
Happy to be here. Doing great.
Ted's the VP of product over at NoviLabs.
That's right.
Got that right? I remembered. Sorry, I was. We went to the rodeo kicked off last night, and that was the first. Sarah and I. It was like we haven't been since Collins was born, which was 7 years ago now. And I was like, how has it been 7 years already?
Right. I went the 1 year and your dad was cooking.
Yeah, well, that's
why
every year he's on a team. Shout out to Buck and Wing and those guys at the cook-off. Thanks for letting us come hang out with y'all last night. But yeah, I don't normally go to bed at midnight on a Thursday.
Yeah,
so.
we had the Data and Whiskey chat was up till 12:30 if you were one of the real ones.
Yeah, shout out to
8
Jeff
of us
and those
hanging
guys.
out.
Everybody on the Data Whiskey chat where we started kind of sponsoring that. So for those of you who aren't aware, check it out. Was it once a month?
They try for a month, probably at least once a quarter.
Once a quarter, yeah. But really
Just
good
follow
time.
Jeff Hughes, and he'll make sure you know.
Yeah, Bobby and I will repost and share all that stuff as well. But we're gonna mix it up a little bit. Instead of jumping right in, we're gonna kind of bring up some current tech events real quick. The first one I want to just point out because I appreciate a good troll as good as the next guy. Shout out to all of the government services who took down the I think it's BitLocker or BitLock 3.0, but it was a hacker group that would go in and they would essentially lock people out of their enterprise accounts and hold them for ransom, pay them in Bitcoin, and then you'll get your stuff back. But this group took it a step further where they had a public site where they would actually post the company's names with their logos, and they had a timer. And if they didn't pay by the timer, they would release all of the documents that they had. Well, so it came out, I think this morning. I saw on Instagram a number of different federal agencies took them down. They locked out of all their crypto accounts. They've now taken over their website as well and done the exact same. They just completely trolled the hackers.
Awesome.
They've put, they actually released their encryption key on the website. Wow. They now have a countdown that's counting down the time before they release the hackers' personal information. It's a really great
that's a
troll.
little spice coming from the government there.
Yeah. I mean, it's scary, but it's also kind of funny at the same time for just the troll aspect.
You figure the people that the government's probably hiring for that though.
Oh yeah,
they
used to do that.
Yeah, they used to do that. Or that's all these. You have people. That's what penetration testing. Mm-hmm. You have hackers that are just trying to do ethical hacking, right?
Yeah. No, I'm sure most of them have been caught hacking, and now instead of going to jail, they work for the It's a good game theory.
Catch me if you can when they you gotta flip them and they're like, hey, help us.
Game theory is a crazy thing. And prisoner's dilemma when it comes down to that. But I love that. We're getting some sauce out of those guys.
That's fantastic.
And then of course the really exciting one or funny one, I guess, in the tech space this week is the Gemini. What do we know? Is it the same name for their vision model? Or I don't know.
I'm not sure.
I think it's Gemini. All wrapped up in Gemini. Yeah.
So the Gemini vision update came out this week, and it's apparently just like overly woke. And if you ask it like a picture of the founding fathers, it returns a bunch of people that are definitely not what the founding fathers look like.
It was watching too much Hamilton.
Yeah, right. But I just, like I said, we're trying to bring up some relevant kind of tech topics at the beginning of the show.
But I know that stirred some things up for Ted, historically. So
I love all these AI image tools online and love to find the corners of them and places where they'll run into issues. But I mean, when I saw this, I thought this was crazy, but I always leap to like, okay, well, what can we do for like oil and gas related things?
Sure.
So I got it. I asked it, draw me an image of a protester in France with a Just Stop Oil, and spit that out, including like it did like an oil sheik, like holding up like someone from the Middle East, like holding up a Just Stop Oil, which I thought was creative.
Right.
But then I asked it, okay, well, do the same thing, but for more LNG. And it's like, sorry, I can't do that. I don't advocate for fossil fuel usage. I was like, okay, do it for nuclear. It's like, no, I can't do that. I was like, all right,
that's insane.
How about more lithium mining? It goes, no, mining is bad and potentially dangerous, and I can't render that. So I thought all that was crazy. And then, not to get too political, but you could ask it the same thing, like, have more children. And it said, no, overpopulation is dangerous. Like, I can't advocate that. It's like pretty crazy the level of instructions that they put into it. And you know, it's just worrying to have an institution as important as Google like be putting clear like bureaucratic thinking over this.
Yeah, you gave me I think it was yesterday when I saw that thread come up, and you gave me a nice dose of anxiety considering pretty much most of my data storage is on on Google Cloud. I was like, God bless. This is why we won't be on a major cloud platform at some point in the future.
But I mean, they came out, it was what, 2 or 3 years ago, they came out and said they weren't going to help with any more models to help with extraction. But then like 2 months later, signed a contract with Saudi.
You know,
it's like
money talks, guys. Shocker. They're still in business to make money.
No, it's crazy. I mean, I think this, for whatever reason, the folks working on the image side of the Gemini model put in like much stronger limitations. Like in Google's defense, you could go ask the Gemini text model to like give a defense of the use of LNG, and it would give you like, yes, it can help you switch from coal. And it's like a reliable baseload power source, like all the stuff that you would like expect.
Yeah.
But the image instructions were just absolutely crazy.
Yeah, and it's probably one of like overcorrecting, because I mean, I know it's always been kind of a with any of the image training. I think they were like, well, again, it's biased towards what you've trained it on. So if you've only trained it on Americans or only trained it on like certain races, obviously it's going to be biased that way. So they feel like they just swung way too hard the other way.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if it was an error in their testing to not run it through, because it's not crazy to want to, you know, hey, make me an image of people working in a coffee shop or, you know, a boardroom or something. To want to have like not just white dudes in that. Like that's pretty solid. But, you know, to put in, draw me a picture of the medieval king of England and then like literally a black woman, you know? It's like, maybe not. It's not exactly accurate.
Yeah. Well, and you did bring up a point earlier before we started, it's like, maybe, or somebody did in the office, I don't know who exactly, but is this maybe like an intentional thing to drive more traffic so that more people use it so that the model gets trained faster? Could be. I don't know. That's a kind of a brilliant or completely disastrous. Like that could go one of two really good ways or really bad ways.
This one feels like it went too far.
Well, just like no such thing as bad publicity.
This would not count as bad publicity.
It's no, it's crazy, all of this stuff. But yeah, it does highlight the point that these models are only as good as how they're trained, right? Like they're not magic. They're not but it's also a thing to talk about that people continuously need to keep talking about. That's why open source is such a good thing, is because it doesn't give power to an individual.
Right.
And yeah, you know, as we're all Bitcoin maxis in the office and stuff too, for many reasons around that stuff. So it's interesting to kind of talk about that and see how that evolves. And so you guys like that, we'll keep kind of talking about some of the current events on this stuff. But it was just relevant because, of course, your thread yesterday
super
it blew up on the internet yesterday. So well, tell us about yourself. How how did you get into energy and tech? Where'd you grow up? Were you taking things apart, messing around on computers, or were you it's the theme across all the episodes is there is just genuinely not a traditional background, which is really cool, which is one of the reasons
there's no one path.
Yeah. Well, I definitely probably have come into this from not a traditional background, like software engineering or anything like that. But I'm from San Antonio, and I studied geology in college. So, I grew up like there's a little bit of oil industry floating around. My grandfather worked in the business. He was a chemist for Texaco, actually. So I still have his patents on some lubes.
That's awesome.
That's awesome.
Yeah, pretty sweet. And my dad invested in some bad oil and gas wells. But I have an amazing picture of me and my brother out on some drill site that was a dry hole when we were 6 years old or something.
That's awesome.
Pretty sweet.
Yeah, you didn't know any better. This is great.
Yeah, exactly. My first dry hole. That was So I studied geology and went into the business after getting my master's degree, and went to ConocoPhillips, where I did 5 years there. And it wasn't really at all on the digital or tech side, like other than just the fact that geologists are looking at logs or interpreting seismic or making maps. And I was really interested in decision making
Yeah.
and in forecasting.
Mhm.
And I had like a what's the red pill moment, or more of the from the Matrix, where somebody showed me a cross plot. This is the only podcast where I can wax poetic about a single cross plot that like changed my life. But somebody showed me a cross plot of globally the productive area of field on the x-axis, like oil fields, like it was 2 square kilometers or 10 square kilometers or 200 square kilometers, and on the y-axis was the reserves of the field. And so you could say, for a field that's 5 square kilometers, like we'd expect it to have between, whatever it was, like 3 and 10 million barrels.
Right.
I'm just, I don't remember what the numbers were, but, so I was like, wow, this is incredible. It's like I was working in exploration at the time, and we'd have prospects we were looking at, and, we'd get numbers back, and I'd be like, I don't know, feels like a lot, or a little,
Sure,
but it's like, so this was just, wow, we can actually ground like our exploration expectations in this like global database. Like this is fantastic at how we can understand and make better decisions ultimately as a company for where to invest our precious exploration capital.
Yeah. Well, I think that's one of those things that like so many people outside of the industry just don't think about, is it's like you can go bankrupt real quick in the oil and gas business because it's super expensive. It's super risky. To your point, you can go drill a dry hole, and then,
especially exploration.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And then no one's hardly, I mean, I'm sure some people are, but there's not a ton of true exploration going on now.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like relative to what it was.
Pretty limited.
Like,
yeah.
Definitely not nearly as much onshore anymore. I mean, you've got the, the big offshore stuff that is basically always going to be kind of a staple baseline, I feel like,
right,
especially internationally. But yeah, compound, in my opinion, bad energy policy along with depressed energy prices for long enough. And then guess what? Energy companies quit spending money on exploration. And then guess what? Oh, we're now
especially when
declining
the risk is so
in
high.
production.
I mean, I remember at Conoco, I mean, I think there was like right when everything went to crap, then there was like a $400 million dry hole. Like you can't afford that. Like
that's crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, and when you can basically a manufacturing mode in all your onshore basins, and at least have some certainty as to what you're going to produce.
Well, even the early days too, right? Like just thinking about how expensive some of the wells were that we fracked back in like the early 2010s, even, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like we were selling resin coat or ceramic proppant for $1 a fucking pound, like, and no one uses. We didn't even need that, right? Like we were washing out all of our frack fluid ends and stuff, pumping Haynesville jobs with ceramic and cross-linked gel, and it's like none of that happens anymore.
Yeah,
it's like
changed a lot.
Yeah, you know, it's just such a different thing. But even now, it's like, okay, we know where a lot of these shale plays are, at least, and there's a lot of those plays that we know of that either were too expensive or are still uneconomic at current prices. This is my issue with any kind of peak commodity, not just oil, but any kind of commodity, is the minute, yes, you at a certain price, there is a peak, but that's not how commodities work. When supply goes down, when demand goes up or supply goes down, the price adjusts. And so if price gets above a certain point, those uneconomic things now become economical.
Exactly.
And so now you have a whole new swath of reserves that,
well, and that's like shale anyways, right? I mean, like,
right. No, that's exactly what
they always knew
was,
there was oil there. Just like
matter of getting it out.
Right.
The technology and then just the money to spend.
Yeah. They've known those resource rocks for years or decades.
There's just so many examples of that, of, I love the Comstock Western Haynesville results coming back. It's just like absolute monster wells, but
insane.
It costs like what, $30 plus million to DNC, and there's other examples of, the whole Western US, like almost every basin, like you can produce gas from horizontal wells. It's just, how are you going to compete with Marcellus?
Yeah.
It's tough. But eventually,
and need infrastructure and all that.
Yeah, they need infrastructure and all that. But in 30 years, that 6 BCF well that you can drill in the Mancos in almost any basin, like might be looking really pretty.
Right. Or at $5
I remember people
MCF.
Sure,
that's the thing. Yeah. That's what gas. It's like enough people start buying up and sitting on the gas, and they just finally let that associated gas peter out over time, which not going to happen if you keep drilling new oil wells in the Permian. But how do you keep operating at $2 gas for like that to me also actually just shows like how resilient our industry is. The fact that nat gas has been an average of maybe $3 over the last 10, 15 years
Pretty
now.
much since I've been in the industry.
Yeah,
like,
no,
I mean,
literally.
like,
I came in at the tail end, like on the downside of gas prices when the Fayetteville, because I was working in the Fayetteville where people actually wanted to work in the Fayetteville and were exploring in the Fayetteville, right? Like no one is exploring in the Fayetteville now because it's, but it's a super easy play to like operate. It's shallow, low pressure. Yeah. And so it's, all that stuff's fascinating. But
so let's kind of dive in, because I think there's kind of an important thing, and I don't know if we talk about it much, but like you said, your kind of red pill moment or whatever.
Yeah.
I feel like, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's almost like kind of that marrying of like kind of a statistical world with a physical world. Because I mean, I imagine as a geologist, you're looking at logs and a lot of things that are probably more physical type parameters to come up with the evaluation. And then it's like, wait, we can do some of this statistically too. And at the very least, them together, they're great. But,
Yeah, for sure. And that's, I think a lot of the reason that was of interest to me is, you coming from like a conventional background and then moving into unconventionals, especially from a geology perspective. There's so much, all these assumptions and techniques that had been kind of built up for the conventional world. Let's just take a simple example, like a play fairway map. You might, if you're analyzing for a conventional prospect, you might go, well, I'm going to need a mature source rock, and I'm going to need a certain amount of sand presence, and these depths I can drill in, whatever. You come up with like stoplights, like red, yellow, green.
Sure.
Then you go, we'll go lease up the green and go drill the prospects there. It's like pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
But you go into an unconventional play. What thickness do you need of the reservoir?
There's so many variables. Like, just thinking about it purely like mathematically from an engineering perspective, one shale well has so many knobs that you can tweak on it. And that's just, okay, assuming you got the geology part right, which that's a whole nother can, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like one frac job. Okay, how many perfs? What phasing? What's the distance between the perfs? Yeah. How much sand? What pounds per gallon? How do you ramp it up? What rate? What fluids? There's so much that goes into it.
And the heterogeneity. I mean,
right. That's what I'm saying. Like, that's not even including the rock part of it, right? Like, there's so much more on that.
And like, just to give you one concrete example of that, like a lot of times, like here at Novi, we analyze all sorts of geological data to try and find trends for shale production, right? And one thing that often surprises people is our models will say, like, actually, you want thinner reservoir, not thicker reservoir. And like, that goes counter to your intuition. But the fact is, in many systems, not always the case. If it's thinner, it means like the organics maybe have been concentrated in a smaller area.
It's not as spread out.
And so you're draining, 60 feet of good stuff rather than 300 feet of marginal rock.
Yeah.
And it's counterintuitive. You explain it to someone, eventually they'll probably understand it. Yeah. But you have to look at that data to come up with your, new models of thinking about these.
Well, and that's the other thing too, right? Is like, if you have an unlimited budget, you can, generally speaking, do most anything you want. But it's one of those things too. It's like at the end of the day, we are still a business, right? And so like, I could spend 30 million and make, whatever, 5,000 barrel a day well, but at $50 oil price, that doesn't work, right? Like, especially with the decline curves and all of that, with all the shale stuff. And so that's a whole nother, like a thinner reservoir with better quality rock means that I don't have to put as big of a frac on it. I don't have to have as many stages. I don't have much sand or as much horsepower. Like, there's so many other components to it, right? Like, because it's like, okay, the frac design, you can optimize the frac design for production, but then you have that cost element too, where it's like, also the economics have to work.
Yeah. And well, in the industry is, some people are still in the whole like bigger is better type thing, but the last 5 years after the big crash in 2014 and then going through another round in COVID has been trying to figure out like how to optimize my economics.
No, I remember selling frac jobs. I was in Chesapeake's office and they had just had like there was like a press release, and I asked them how it happened, and they had like, Jeffrey's analysts or whatever in the office, and in their hallways, they had like kind of like at a school, you've got your projects up on like boards in the hall and you can see it. And there was a pad they were doing. I think it was in the Haynesville. It was either Haynesville or South Texas, but it was like mega pad or something. And it was like, I can't remember, 5,000 pounds a foot or something stupid.
Right.
And it was just like this big deal. And they, had a poster of it. Well, the analyst saw it and then wrote up this whole article on it and put it out and all this stuff. And but like that, those early days where it's like, yeah, we just kept increasing the pounds per foot.
But I mean,
but there's always a diminishing return at some
But
point.
that's the whole like the Pareto curve, like engineering, you've got to push the limits and see, I know, I think we did like a kitchen sink test in the Eagle Ford where it was like, let's do ceramic proper and this and like just throw as much as we can, see what we get.
Yeah. Well, that's the other part of it too, right? Is it's like, well, do you throw everything at one, or do you try and like scientifically change one control?
And then we went to that though. Then we did some really high water, ratio. This, all in the, but
it's there's a lot like.
Well, and all of that is valuable, but there's also, I think, a lot of folks underestimate like the natural variability of well results, and it's just it's so hard to make a decision off of like 2 wells where you just varied one little thing,
and in the end doesn't matter. Obviously it's at some level it matters. The completions have gotten better and more targeted, and
and they've gotten better, but they've also gotten a lot simpler in a lot of aspects too, right? Like you're not designing, based off crush strength or your closure stress, and then your crush strength of your sand, and then your chemical. Like everybody pretty much pumps slick water. Everybody's pumping dust. Because dust is infinitely more permeable than no permeability, right? Like exactly. It really, when you put it into that perspective or whatever, but it's crazy how much all of that has kind of just evolved in just the last 10, 15 years.
Okay. So you had your kind of red pill moment. So where did it take you after that? Like, was that within Conoco and then ultimately to you went from Conoco to Novi? Or
that's right. Yeah. So while I was within Conoco, I like naturally glommed onto any projects that could have like a
data bent
to them. And I Conoco was great, gave some data science training, shout out Citizen Data Scientists program. That was fantastic. And, but eventually I was kind of looking for something new to do, looking for a change.
Did you work on any of the frac hit stuff?
I didn't work on the frac hit stuff. No. Yeah. I mean, a million projects going on there.
Yeah.
But I would do stuff like with more of a geologic bend, like where like landing zone picking, things like that. But yeah, so jumped over to Novi back in 2019, like 5 years ago now.
Nice.
So been there ever since.
That was how
mature was Novi?
Yeah, how mature was Novi at that point? Were they
company was like 4 years old at that point. Yeah. So we the founder came out of Hess. He did data analytics for Hess. He was involved in IT, like high level guy, but saw a real opportunity, hey, data driven methods, cloud compute, machine learning, all this data being generated in shale. Probably had some of the same awakenings like I did.
Yeah.
But went over, started Novi, realized this is something that operators should not be doing themselves. There should be a software solution for this. And then in 2019, we raised a Series A, and I came on board along with various others at that time.
Nice. That's awesome. So break Novi down for people who don't know kind of what's the focus, what's the benefits, that sort of thing.
Who are you targeting?
High level first, and then we'll start getting into the tech and all of that
fantastic stuff. Yeah. At a high level, we have really 2 offerings. One is machine learning software for production forecasting and development optimization. So how many wells should I drill in a section? How much proppant should I pump? Those types of questions. And that's mostly used by like large E&Ps, like, the biggest of the big. And then there's, we also offer data, kind of just like HS or Inveris, we go out to state agencies and collect it. But because we have all these relationships with operators, like we can license proprietary data, and we have all this technology that we use to, do a better job at production allocation or PDP forecasting and things like that.
Cool. So what does that mean on the tech side now? Let's kind of start slowly unpacking that to the extent that you can, of course. Just like workflow. I'm a NoviLabs user.
Yep.
I want to use one of your, let's say the ML tool for production. What does that kind of look like high level? I'm pulling in, I assume, a bunch of production data, right?
Yeah, exactly. We'll have everything preloaded in there if it's from our public data sources, which is part of the reason we have that whole offering, is because, believe it or not, it can take operators a long time to get their data together.
No,
I know.
Never.
But you can go in if you're an operator at a big Permian company or wherever, you can load in your production data, load in your completions designs. If you have your own geology you want to use, you can load that in. And first step, we'll build a data set. That's always the most important place to start.
Yeah.
You guys cover this, but it's a huge pain to get everything cleaned up and normalized and in the same, the same format, right tables, etc. So we'll do all that, and then we have data that's ready for modeling. So we have, and it's all web-based tools, but web-based tools for training a machine learning model. So you'll say, all right, well, I'm going to go grab this data set that I just built, but let me just filter down to the Northern Delaware Basin as my focus area, or wherever it is. Choose the variables you want to use, a few other little configuration items. Model will train all in AWS, and you'll get some results back on, feature importance and error scores or things like that. So you can say, okay, yeah, this looks good. Let me now go use it to make a decision about my lateral length or whatever business questions that they have going on.
And so can they do like, it doesn't necessarily have to be true multivariate, but this, tweak the knobs, turn the knobs, change the, that's the whole idea.
How much does it abstract, but then also how much control does it give? Like, so I'm sure you've got different types of users. You may have a reservoir engineer who just, kind of adjacent and understands enough, and your platform needs to handle more of that, but maybe there's more data science-y type that may want to get in and tweak the knobs a little more.
Yeah.
And like it always happens in oil and
frat
gas
guy,
engineers.
Right? I want to come in and be like, all right, let's really see what we can do here. I'm gonna be playing with lateral lengths and perfs
for sure.
and sand.
We try to set up our models in a way that they can be, there's never going to have one size fits all, but they can be pretty well multi-purpose. Like if you made something that was purely just for optimizing completions, like that would be great. But to your point, that's going to have interactions with, let's say, your spacing and your stacking design. And so it can be sometimes hard to answer those questions in a vacuum. So we have it set up to be able to answer those.
Yeah, no, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Because I think that's historically been one of the big issues. One of the things that actually just almost forced, we structurally, companies tend to have kind of their walls and their barriers between departments or groups or whatever. But then it gets even worse when you have these siloed data products that it's just like, okay, this is just for this one thing, then this is just for this other thing, but those things are directly related to each other, and they directly cause and affect each other.
Exactly.
So there's no
collinearity,
right?
Yeah, but then like it depends on some of the models. And I was going to ask, like, do they get to pick some of them, like the actual models that are being used in a hood? Like, can I say, I want to do a random forest and an XGBoost and stuff like that? Because like XGBoost handles collinearity, kind of, but other ones you have to min-max normalize and all kind of stuff.
So we've selected algorithms that are like pretty robust to these types of problems, and like we generally want the users to not have too many ways to mess things up. Now we do have some more advanced algorithms that like collinearity like would give you a bigger problem for, like, let's say, versus random forest that would be easier. Like we do use a lot of random forest, but like we try to as much as we can like have chosen, maybe not like our algorithms are more accurate than reservoir engineers at forecasting their wells, and we've done dozens and dozens of competitions where we've beat them, but maybe there could maybe be a little extra benefit on the accuracy you could get at the cost for either risk of the algorithms like messing up if certain things are done incorrectly, or loss of explainability and how they work.
Yeah, that's one of the trickiest things, I feel like, that a lot of people, not a lot, but people just need to consider anytime they're trying to introduce or talking about AI or any kind of potential black box product in the energy space, specifically the oil field, because as engineers, we all want to know how the thing works, right? Exactly. And so if you can't generally explain how it works, which is not always easy, even just with a normal, like, it's not because it's my proprietary model, it's just that's how they work. It's not that's why computers do it, because we as humans can't comprehend and understand the data just as it is. So that's why we have to have a computer to do it. But then the user wants to know, well, how did you do it? There's that dichotomy there all the time, right? And so it's always this like fine balance of like, okay, well, here's what it is, and then here's some variables and constraints that you can play with. But also from just software design, it's like good software is easy to use. It's hard to mess up. It's easy to use from a user perspective. And so there's always that balance of like,
Yeah, and that's been our goal, is to have something which is like easy to use and reliable. I mean, where, you know, there are some places where you can, you know, pop open the advanced section and like edit a few additional things, but those are kind of with additional caution.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing too, right? It's like, yeah, you could get potentially a few percentage points better on whatever stat that you're trying to get, but then the repeatability drops. And so
there's that, like, or you're overfitting at that point.
Right. Yeah. That's also another very big point too.
So let's get into the tech stack. And I don't know how deep you get into it personally at Novi, but I'm sure you at least
I'll do what I can.
Yeah. So it's on like AWS, using on top. I mean, so are y'all probably using like Dockerized type things underneath the hood, or is it, you know, using the SageMaker, or I mean,
not so much on SageMaker.
Yeah, it's
a lot of
too expensive.
Yeah, Dockerized things, lots of step functions, lambdas, depending on what we're doing.
And your stuff's all cloud based, right?
All cloud based. Yeah.
I mean, do you feel equipped to talk about like, say, step functions or lambda, like just to explain them to people? Or?
I'm not gonna. Okay. No, that's beyond my expertise.
Okay, no, I mean, because like step functions are literally like, you can just define like literal like step, because, and that came up too. I think I was talking to Derek Turk one time, and he's like, why do they use step functions? Because it's a totally different thing in engineering, I think, than what they're talking about in AWS.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's like just like a nice way of scheduling out different.
Yeah, you just like, say once this is done, then do this, then do that. You know,
it's just a logical order.
Yeah. And then for people that maybe not be aware, lambdas are basically like, you can write functions like serverless functions that run, and you can run in Python.
Yep.
Probably basically almost any language at this point for the most, within AWS.
Yeah, they're pretty sweet.
JavaScript, C#, Java, all of it, but definitely can be an affordable way. I mean, once you get a certain scale, you start paying, and like, but the thing is, you get like free 1 million lambdas a month, I think, or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, AWS is great, but they definitely get you with like the low initial cost. And
then as you scale,
all great software companies I found have that. It's not quite freemium, but it's pretty close, right?
It's
like,
a good model to have.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's the drug dealer model. I'll get you hooked on this little thing, and then you'll come back. It's the Philip Morris model. We get you addicted to it, and then you just keep coming back, right? Like, no, that's. So I've got kind of a interest. Well, on that point, maybe not as far deep in the tech side, but from a client perspective, what are some of the, you don't have to mention specific names or anything like that, but just from like a case study benefits perspective, what are some of the some of the more interesting things that your clients have kind of,
some wins or whatever?
That have come out of Novi with your product?
We have.
I'm sure there's a lot.
We have a bunch of them to share, but like a few of them that we've gone over before. We had this is like going to be a little bit of a different take here for a second, but in addition to just like development optimization, that'd be one win, and we can come back to that in a second. We also have customers who use us for like asset valuation, A&D type workflows.
Relevant right now with
relevant right now.
All the acquisitions happening.
Yeah, so we had a customer, Primex Resources, who sold to Callan, and they used our software to like, let me lay out some sticks on our acreage and forecast those and compare them to what Callan had, and it's going to be accretive to your acreage quality to like make this deal. That's just like, and then they sold for hundreds of millions of dollars.
Like, and they could do that because you've got all the public data there.
Yeah, exactly.
Out of the box.
It's the advantage for them is it's a consistent model.
Right.
It's accurate. It's data driven. It's almost kind of like a fair opinion to have on this. And there are plenty of other uses for like buying acreage and things like that we've had customers use it for. And then lots of other customers just for like, we had a company up in Canada who, we have stage design, proppant loading, fluid loading, lots of different things they could vary on their completions design. And, if we keep this one constant and move that one down, boom, you save $600,000 on a well.
Yeah.
And no change to your production. Great. So that was another nice win, times however many dozen wells that you're drilling up there, it really adds up.
No, that's I've been preaching that ever since I got out of the field and into the office and had like a perspective looking, because before I got in the oil field, I was in manufacturing, and it was such I've said it many times, but it's just such a dichotomy there where
Oh,
in
yeah.
manufacturing, you are monitoring every cent, every second, literally, of every process.
And everything's just in time.
Right.
And like,
Everything. Yeah. And everything is optimized, not only the actual manufacturing of whatever you're making, but also the inventory for the things that you're making on a daily basis, right? You're not over ordering inventory. So you have 100 pumps just sitting there waiting to be manufactured, even though they can't be manufactured for 6 more months. That's literally a waste of your capital because it's not doing anything. And so then going, sitting on a frac job and like all the shit that happens on frac sites and all the NPT and all the random stuff. And then it's like, because it's just a giant logistics operation at the end of the day. It is the problem, the hard part about the oil field operation side, besides the fact that, you know, you're typically in the middle of nowhere and you have no connectivity and limited resources, is the fact that it's a literal mobile factory. Like it's essentially what it is, right? If you had a plant that you were just trucking sand and chemicals and water in and out of, it's essentially a frac site, right? Like, except now it moves every 2 weeks. You know, like,
and so every 2 weeks.
Right. Yeah. So you don't have internet all the time. You have, so it makes all these logistics, you know, much harder. Yeah. Then you have weather, there's all these other things. Right. And so it's there's just so much room for optimization there though. Like, and that's the thing, the scale of it, right? If 50,000, 10%, whatever on a single well may not, or 1% on a single well may not sound like a lot, but 1% on $5 million AFE on 1,000 wells is a lot of money. You know? It's, but yeah, I feel like the low prices have really finally forced people to really optimize for that cost side.
Yeah. It's both cost side and well performance.
Yeah.
I mean, it just forces you to optimize whatever you can to stay in business.
Yeah. Well, and then of course everyone finally debunked the Aubrey methodology of just ripping the chokes for IPs and not worrying about what those decline curves look like and the production. But it that's like, so as far as that goes, I mean, was it something as simple as like, was it something kind of stupid simple that ended up saving them all of that per?
Oh yeah, it was something like make our stage lengths like 20 meters longer or something. It was something on that order. Yeah. Because a lot, I mean, for almost any of completions variables, there will be a point of diminishing returns where your capital efficiency changes, but there may also be a point of like not diminishing, but like no more returns at all.
Yeah. You can't squeeze any more out of that route.
And like being past that point is you don't want
to.
Yeah. And that of course varies depending on the geology and all the other things that are going on, which is the complexity of the challenge.
Yeah. How does that work together as far as like, you know, I'm an operator, I'm developing a field, so I've got my existing production, now I'm trying to plan my infill in whatever area, right? I think one of the things the industry finally is kind of all in consensus about is that, you know, a field is a system. It's not a well and then another well and then another well. They all interact. They're all pulling from essentially the same rock. They're all the same rock, right? And so, you know, I vividly remember, y'all both worked at Conoco. Shout out to Dave Kramer. I vividly remember going to like a SP Lunch and Learn with Dave Kramer, where he was talking about some Barnett use cases where, you know, just infill Barnett, like there was no reason they shouldn't be able to frack these wells, and they could not get into them. Like they were pressuring out every single time. And, well, you know, it took, I don't know how long, but anyway, net of it was, well, they had an offset that had been on production for, you know, 2 years. On the other side of the pad, they had a well that had just been fracked, and not bled off, or like just fracked, not even producing. So super high pressure zone over here, low pressure sink over here, and you're fracking in the middle of them. So guess where your pressure is going to go? It's going to go to the low pressure. Fluid flows from high to low. Like that's basic physics. We learned that.
Even geologists know that.
Right. Decades ago. But, you know, it took this full case study for like them to be like, oh yeah, and the result was they shut in the well that had been on production and let it build up. They turned on the well that they had fracked and drew that pressure down a little bit. And then guess what? They had no problems. And it's like, oh, and then you get all the frack hit stuff that we've been doing for the last 10 years now too. And it's like, hey guys, how much value have we just completely destroyed in these fields?
Well, I think that's one of the advantages of the new plays that are coming online is they can take all those learnings and apply them.
I mean, I think you hear a lot about like the Vaca Muerta.
I would love to have an empty Vaca Muerta block right now and just be able to take all the learnings from North America. I mean, that's what you know, you can go look at some companies down there like, well, hold on, what if we do like 2,800 pounds per foot and drill like a 3-mile lateral? And it's like, lo and behold, like you get great results.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, that's better than the Permian actually, but it's to be able to go in there. Plus down there, they also like typically it's not, you know, you're not drilling sections. It's like lease blocks, like
Right.
traditional governmental licensing. So you have more freedom for like program level development than you do if you're, you know, you got a HPP.
Oh yeah, no, there's a whole land. I mean, we're in the Bakken right now, and it's like, you know, because again, the direction of stress doesn't matter, and like literally drilling, call them hashtag wells, wherever. Like you had wells that were north south, and then drilling across them, like in the same zone, and just like not fracking. Yeah, but then there's a ton of value that you're unlocking.
Yeah,
you know that because you're able to do that there.
Yeah,
but fascinating.
No, I'm very convinced.
But then there's all this whole land like Tetris thing of like. And it's worse than Tetris because they can overlap. Right. And then if they overlap, then like it gets so crazy in the legal land side of it. Like where you could actually maybe steal acreage.
It'd be much easier if you just had one government.
Like saying like just big thing. You're like, let's just stack them in, you know, line up in here. And
yeah, I've never envied, whenever I remember the first time I found out that, you know, certain states you can split by depth too.
Like,
I will never be a landman because that sounds so
it's so complex.
Like, just the land side and even like the accounting and the operations and, you know, like all the interests and stuff. It just like, that's no one really truly.
Yeah, I'm getting better at it. But like when I hear people talking fluently about it, I'm just like, amazed. Like it's because just. It doesn't click for me. No, like I'm a visual person anyways. Like if I see it, then I can put my hands on it, I get it. But like people are just talking about it out loud. I'm like, there's a lot.
It's crazy complex.
And a lot of kind of risk or, you know, like if you don't understand it, you know.
Like,
who doesn't love litigation risk?
Yeah, no kidding. I'm curious, since we were talking about Vaca Muerta, because for those who don't know, it's in Argentina, right?
Argentina.
And what's the other one? It bleeds over somewhere else too, maybe?
It's basically all in Argentina. Okay. It's kind of in western Argentina, like northern fringe of Patagonia.
But it's like how many meters thick? It's huge.
Well, yeah, I mean it's like the Eagleford, but 3 times thicker is I think the right analogy for it. You know, it has some characteristics in common with the Eagleford and some in common with the Permian. But I mean, extreme pressure, the fracs it just shatters. So I mean, the well results there, modern well results, it's like 30% better than the Permian for oil production.
And that's just from one well.
That would be even for like full like pad drilling, full development.
Yeah, because I was gonna say like I mean, come in and drill a virgin well. I think we saw that too.
I mean, I think over time, just like in any play, you know, they'll start to figure out like which zones are on the, you know, are actually economic, which ones are on the fringes. Like there's definitely stack pay in multiple targets. But like the Eagleford, there's kind of like one
pockets,
super like organic rich zone that's like very well developed. I mean, and it'll change all over the basin depending on where you are. But like, for the most part, there's like a one banger zone and then a few others that look pretty good.
Right. Well, how many meters or feet thick is it? It's something ridiculous.
It varies depending on where you are in the basin, but I think it's I don't know, like 200 to 1,000 feet thick.
It's 1,000 feet thick.
Because you get certain things where, to your point, you were saying earlier, where like it's tight, but there's oil there. But like, I mean, you're gonna have to land your well bore again 3 miles out through this very narrow or very thin.
Yeah.
We're talking about 20 feet.
They try to get, I think, pretty precise in their targeting there. Just to kind of nail down the zones that they're hitting and their stagger pattern or whatever else.
Well, stuff like that makes me, you know, the like the horseshoe wells that they're playing around with, right? Like that actually to me makes a shit ton of sense in these giant, especially on the exploration side where you're going to spend more money anyway.
Right.
But like, hey, let's zigzag basically through this stacked pay and see if we can figure out from a single well, of course,
as long as the completion
costs
efficiency,
the costs
yeah. That's an interesting idea for a test.
I have a lot of questions about it from an operational perspective, just being from the field. That's like I can't. I mean, we always had, you know, issues with, you know, wire lines running in too fast or you're pumping them down too fast, all that stuff. Which is, I know that a lot of that has changed, but even then, it's like, okay, you now have to do that through a dog leg down and then another around the corner.
You could probably just drill something through multiple zones, and if you could fiber the whole thing and do the production allocation, like you could test them without having to do a horseshoe.
That makes a lot
I
of
guess
sense,
in those
actually.
places where you don't, you got a gigantic block to
Right.
deal with, no need to pack it in.
Yeah. No, that's but yeah, going back to the peak oil thing, right? It's like there's all these things that we already know about
Oh yeah.
that are just not economic. Or Vaca Muerta is not one of those, but it's it's like how.
But it's not tapped into yet.
Right,
Really.
that's the thing. It's not even
Yeah,
close
exactly.
to being like exploited
as far
to
as
the point that Eagleford is, or
the
Yeah,
global
to its
demand.
potential.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, even
Yeah.
like Venezuela has more reserves than anyone, right?
Oh,
like
no
and like
kidding. Yeah.
like
Mhm.
if they ever figure it out in the next 50 years, you got a whole
Yeah, I
nother
mean, if you
amount of supply.
transplanted the Orinoco oil belt up into Alberta, it would be like
Yeah,
a
prolific,
world-changing,
yeah.
prolific
Yeah.
field. Not to mention down there's also, I mean, it's not just that. It's like the greatest conventional reservoirs in the Western Hemisphere are also in Venezuela,
Yeah.
like 50 billion barrel fields. There's
Darcy
unconventional
Perm.
prospectivity there.
Of course.
Like it's probably the greatest source rock in the Western Hemisphere.
Yeah.
So it piles on like over and over again, just the richness of the play opportunities there.
Yeah. What you got anything else? Or
I think maybe on the tech side, where is Novi going? I mean, like obviously we've got it's like we have to talk about it, and I like talking about it, but like LLMs, AI, I mean, all that kind of stuff. But I mean, what on the tech side is kind of exciting you guys, and where you trying to steer the product?
Yeah, I mean, we've been doing a couple things as our focus areas recently for, I mean, obviously we're always working on a bunch of things. Like we're doing a big research project of feature engineering on spacing parent-child with great results. But
Sure.
check back in 6 months on that one. But we're trying to build out proprietary data sets. So like in Texas, there's production allocation, so the state publishes production data at the lease level. And in order to figure out what the wells are producing, you have to estimate their production based on well tests. We're like, well, we're pretty good at that, probably the best. But like, what if we didn't have to do that at all? So we've been going out and getting proprietary production data from minerals companies or operators, being like, hey, will you let us just publish your well level data?
right.
Like, sure. So it's been surprisingly helpful. And that's like, as far as the tech side, the data that you use to train your model or make your forecast, that's like more important than the algorithm.
Yeah.
And so like
junk
way
in,
more-
junk out, right? Like
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
what they taught us in math.
So-
every math class I've ever
So we've really been focused on like, well, what can we do to make the data the best possible? Like throwing away assumptions like public data has to be bad. Like,
Yeah.
what if we could go out and build amazing public data sets? So that's one interesting angle there. And then doing what we can to leverage all the technology we've already built for our, E&Ps going out there to optimize the development, make a, $500 million capital decision, on what if you could use that to improve public data for, forecasting PDP wells or like undrilled inventories,
Right.
that are just as sensitive as, making those big decisions, just, ready to go for people as like a data product.
Sure.
So that's like kind of turning our ML platform into kind of advanced data products is like a big effort initiative for us right now.
Sweet.
Where do you, Chuck, wanted me, we were talking about this earlier, but he's like, you just need to ask this question to anybody you're talking to about AI. And so you're going to be the guinea pig. But where, how do you see, if you're thinking of this from the perspective of, I'm a manager or C-suite on the tech side, like how do you see, because Chuck got this question, so it's relevant, but how do you see, or where do you see kind of the AI, the machine learning stuff impacting, an operator's daily or weekly, monthly, lives?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'll say, there's the whole generative AI revolution, ChatGPT and all that, which I think there's like plenty of things to do. But in our industry, we still haven't even remotely come close to implementing, these other machine learning or other data-driven methods that can impact the other business processes, like to your factory analogies for all those optimizations, like simple stuff that's like, how much are my wells going to produce next quarter is like underdeveloped with like the potential that it could be like with data-driven techniques, AI, ML. And there's hundreds of versions of that across the whole stack. But just things like production forecasting, risk, budget and planning, asset valuation, like all these processes that are like still done by engineers, like by hand,
right, or siloed
or in
different.
Excel, or
Yeah.
siloed in different structures throughout through organization. There's still like the job is not done there.
Yeah,
No,
yeah,
big
no,
Yet
very,
they're like
very true.
nowhere close. And at the end of the day, that means like faster time to value, less time wasted,
Lower risk.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Better well performance, lower cost.
Yeah,
Like
just
all
keep-
the stuff that you want to do in your business.
Right.
It's like all the business goals,
yeah.
everybody wants to achieve.
So the answer is lower risk. So
Lower risk. Yeah.
start spending money on it. It's
Yeah.
not a risk from a monetary perspective. It's a risk of if you
Yeah.
don't do it, you're
It's way lower risk than,
doing it by
doing
hand.
it by hand.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
like relying on some, there's a lot of great, I don't know, whatever function you're looking at. Let's say reservoir engineers. A lot of great reservoir engineers out there, but there's risk associated with having them just do everything by hand.
Yeah, or even just, like you said, in a siloed way,
Yeah,
right? Like
exactly.
it's like, oh, well, they can be the best reservoir engineer and doing great things in that one software, but it still doesn't tie into how that affects things upstream and downstream of that.
Yeah.
The
Well,
planning
and
part, right?
consistency. I mean, I think you talked about it earlier, and it was actually a theme we talked a little bit last night too. Is just like, again, production forecasting in a consistent way. I mean,
Yeah.
if you have 4 different, production or reservoir
yeah.
engineers forecasting at a time, like, and they've got their different areas. Some of them just by nature are more conservative or more aggressive, and like,
Exactly.
so then you're going to get this variability. Whereas like if you can codify,
Yeah.
and do it in a consistent manner.
Yeah, that's so huge. I mean, the number of times, like every now and then, we'll like run, like maybe somebody has like a type curve area, and like they'll put that into our models, and it's like we'll see that somebody tends to be more optimistic, or somebody tends to be more pessimistic, or like, hey, why is everybody doing so poorly over here? And it's like often because there's some engineer there who has a different choice about what to do one tiny thing.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But that even comes back then to maybe to some of this where like maybe the AI isn't just doing it for you though, or maybe it is like you have where it's helping them saying, hey, a lot of your stuff's coming out a little aggressive, like,
Yeah, no,
I mean, like almost like a copilot, the whole idea of
Yeah.
a copilot kind of thing where it's like just, making suggestions,
augmenting the workflow.
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah.
doing the work. I'm a big proponent that's how most AI ends up getting kind of rolled into the market, right? Initially it's
Yeah.
not going to be, it's going to do everything for you. It's going to help you. It's going to help guide you. And then while you're doing that, it's going to be learning from how you respond to it. And that's going to be this nice federated learning loop that just makes it better. over
Yeah, I
time.
mean, we'll have customers who every AFE, they'll have their reservoir engineers forecast, and they'll have Novi's forecast. And if there's a large gap between them, they might say like, okay, well, hold on, let's not send this out yet.
Yeah.
Let's try and figure out what's causing the discrepancy. But if they're on top of each other, all right,
Yeah.
good, send it off.
Sweet.
No, I mean, I think that's, I've had conversations internally about using language models for under the same guise of like, okay, here's a transcript, right? Here's the different categories or tags that I want you to use. How would you classify this transcript?
Yeah.
Right. And it's like, hey, if I use the same ML model and the same prompt every time, theoretically, at least, as long as I
should get consistent results.
I should get consistent results.
Yeah.
And that's way better than me saying, okay, Sydney, you're going to take these 25. Bobby, you're going to take these 25 files, and just distributing it out because everybody's going to have a different way of doing it.
Yeah,
And people get tired. I mean, like
Right,
your
like
results,
humans-
just yourself, like I don't, by the 20th one, you're like,
Fatigue,
fuck
yeah.
this. Like,
Yeah.
I mean,
No, well, that's what computers were made for.
Yeah.
It's the monotonous, boring, redundant, repetitive things that humans don't like doing and are not good at to begin with. Right?
We once did a comparison between our spacing calculations and some stuff that were done by hand by a GIS person at one of our customers. And, for the first 40, we were the same. And then the next 20, you see, like, we start to be a little bit better.
Yeah.
And then, like, by the end, the GIS person was like totally messing things up.
Yeah. It was like 1 a.m, and they were trying to get it
Yeah,
done.
exactly. Yeah. It's just, getting their signs wrong. Anyways, all sorts of, but just
no, it's just human nature. I mean,
human nature. I'd be the same thing.
Yeah.
I probably wouldn't have lasted through 40.
No, that's very true. You want to, oh man, it's already an hour. It's crazy how quick stuff
Time
goes.
flies
It does.
when you're having fun.
When you're having fun, for sure, man. That's what we like to do here. So, jump into the speed round.
Speed round.
We're
Let's
just
do
gonna
it.
pepper you with some questions. Who's your favorite kind of social, Twitter, LinkedIn follow? It doesn't have to be one specific platform. But.
Yes. I got 2 favorites right now, and I feel like always when you're looking for this, they got to be funny and insightful. That's your combo.
That's a sweet spot right there.
2 favorites on Twitter: WTI Realist and Joe Merchant. I think it's like the Padre something.
Yeah. Padre guys. 13, I think.
Yeah. Shout out to them.
Yeah, I tweeted him this morning.
Yeah,
tweeted over to Joe.
I laugh so much. Laugh and learn.
That is, I love that about our community. I love that about I'm glad that X is around and still exists and allows people to maintain anonymity and all of that stuff, because we wouldn't get such great, not just interesting insights, but also actually, fun and entertaining as well. So shout out to those guys.
What's a piece of tech that you use daily to like help be a better product manager? I mean, that helps, that you really enjoy using.
I have that question for you as a product owner myself. I'm very curious on some fun tools that you might use.
Well, this is not going to be a fun tools answer. Jira. Yeah.
All right. Moving on.
Yeah, actually, their product discovery tool is pretty slick. It's a thing they rolled out for product management specifically. It's been pretty nice for like high level roadmap planning stuff.
It's like a kind of a template or workflow that you kind of work through.
Yeah, it has a lot of similarity to Jira in that, like, for those who don't know, Jira is like a ticketing and a planning system that's used extensively like in the tech industry for like, what are we going to work on this week or like this quarter, things like that, and all the detailed, this and that, et cetera. But this lets you kind of, lay out timelines and move things around boards, like kind of like almost a little bit of Notion style flexibility, but like within the Jira ecosystem.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's good. No, I mean, Jira is a standard, right? As far as
can't live with it, can't live without it.
Yeah. It's like anytime I'm working with a contractor consulting dev shop, if they say Jira, it's just like, oh, my heart. I don't want to have to open Jira. And as long as you said it, like that's my only gripe with Jira is it's like any other big enterprise software. It's like, it's only as good as it is structured initially, right? But it's so flexible that it's very easy to be like, well, what the hell am I doing here?
Yeah, exactly.
That was a good question. What are some of your favorite product kind of books or blogs or any kind of written content?
Yeah, let's see. I'll shout out like a couple books here for folks to learn from. Like, I mean, I've got a few things on the other ones, but favorite, you've got like this came up a little bit earlier. You're talking about all your lean manufacturing, lean startup, Eric Ries, like classic one. Every product manager should read that.
Yep.
Innovator's Dilemma, Clayton Christensen. Another kind of classic one right there. And I'm blanking on the third one I wanted to recommend.
Crossing the Chasm.
Yeah, dude.
That was it.
That's like your triangle,
no,
right?
That's
the triumvirate.
Like literally, yeah.
That's
I could see it in my. I could
the
see
Holy Trinity of product.
I could see the Holy Trinity right there. Yeah, which hey, maybe that's not like innovative things here, but like we got a lot of folks in oil and gas or geologists like don't know about like product management, like that it exists.
Yeah,
I didn't read these until I kind of started.
Same.
It's like, whoa, great books.
No, I was in engineering and then sales and technical sales, and then I got into product, and it's one of those things like until I read that book, it's almost like you're just floating and you don't know, because there's just like, it's all new and you've never done it before, and like, yeah, you can have training and stuff on it, but that doesn't necessarily translate always in the real world. And so after reading Crossing the Chasm for the first time, and I was reading that as we were working on rolling out new products, I was like, oh my God, like this is what I've been looking for. Like,
it's amazing.
Clearly defines each segment of your audience throughout an entire product's life cycle, what their personalities are, what their interests are, how to connect with, like everything.
I read that. I was like, speak to me.
Yeah. Well, because it's just like, it's scary. It's unknown. You're like, you just don't know what to do. Like how there's so many variables and things that you're just like, you don't know. And
I love reading those books too. Like Innovator's Dilemma, he'll talk about like stuff from a long time ago, of like certain
70s and 80s
excavator technology, hydraulics versus pulley system, and it's like it actually is the same like repeatable motifs, no matter what technological like generation you're in, and it's the applying those concepts is so powerful.
Yeah, even Crossing the Chasm is like what, late 90s or
Yeah.
like
Oh yeah, I mean,
2000s,
they're I
right?
don't know. They're talking about I don't know, like
Early internet
early
days,
It's like,
internet
you know, like,
technology.
does psychology change? I mean, like,
Right.
we're still dealing with humans,
It's
right?
the
And,
same
like,
exact.
yeah.
Yeah, great point.
Yeah. Well, and it's just such a good, you know, because they take it from the Crossing the Chasm specifically is talking about technology, right? But it's like most products are driven by some kind of technology, so it's literally every market.
At some point, they had to get
everything.
someone to use the wheel, right?
Right,
I mean,
exactly.
like,
Yeah.
I assure you, this is better. Like,
Yeah. You don't want to drag your
There's a draggard instead of a laggard, right?
Yeah. Great.
Bobby, they didn't roll the pyramids into place anyway. Acoustics. Conspiracy. I need my tinfoil.
Let's get Jeff Hughes in here.
Yeah. No, Jake actually made a request to make some tinfoil hats
nice.
for the
we were
Bitcoin podcast.
Well, yeah,
as well,
Jeff
so.
got into the moon landing last night, and I think it's hard because I brought up, just that most people from Oklahoma I know are kind of tinfoil hat and really like their like kind of things that they can control.
And Jeff confirmed that.
Yeah, he's like, you're absolutely right. But I'll go last one. Just where's your favorite place to go on vacation?
Oh man, tough one. I'm probably more of like a mountains guy.
Okay.
I always dream about like going backpacking.
Well, geologist
or
too.
fly
You get to like see
fishing or
some like
something,
rocks and stuff.
So I'll shout out, let's say, Wind River Range in Wyoming.
Okay.
Yeah, amazing. It's like a mini Sierra Nevada.
Yeah. Nice.
Same geology, topography, kind of glaciated granite. Little geology shout out right there. But it's nowhere near as crowded as the Sierra, and it's like over a lifetime you could hike the whole range if you wanted to.
Wow.
It'd be tough to do that in the Sierra.
Quick follow up to that,
Yeah.
and then we'll wrap up. What are some of your favorite places to check out, like outcrops? Just geology question.
Oh, geology question. I mean, tough here in Houston.
Well,
a lot of clay.
Not much here in
Yeah.
Houston. It's a sea level and flat.
Yeah, there's some good spots in Austin,
Yeah.
like great road cuts you can look at.
It's almost dangerous. Like I drive.
It's almost dangerous.
Yeah.
I'm actually literally going on a field trip tomorrow where they're like, wear your orange safety vests and like don't step off and die.
Yeah.
Into the, but
Well, even
anyway.
just driving though, right? Like my in-laws, he's got a ranch south of Ozona, and just driving. Once you get west of San Antonio, going to Ozona, you've got the road literally cut through the rock, and you can see all the nice planar.
Oh yeah,
it's really
it's
fun,
pretty sweet.
but it's like, I'm also going 85 miles an hour. I need to like focus.
But a little less dangerously, you can just go into the Austin green belts, and you have a lot of the same exposure. See the same rocks, pretty sweet. My wife always has to deal with me, even though we hike on the same trails like almost every weekend.
Yeah,
like I'll be like, oh, look at these mud cracks, or some great burrows.
Yeah.
Look at the chert nodules.
Oh yeah, my wife makes fun of me for bringing rocks and stuff back from different vacations and stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'll show you my rock collection on my desk when we're done.
Yeah, excellent.
Where can appreciate you coming on? Where can people find you? How do they get in touch if they want to learn more?
Get in touch. NoviLabs.com, NoviLabs.com.
And you're on LinkedIn and Twitter
I'm on
as
LinkedIn
well?
and Twitter. Yeah, Twitter at Ted Cross. LinkedIn, just search for Ted Cross. You'll probably find me there.
Yeah, perfect. Man, appreciate you coming on the show with us.
Yeah, pleasure. Thanks, guys.
It's fun.
Great.